Hi, this is Sean from Ace Appliance in Toledo, Ohio. Welcome back to another in-home diagnostic video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com. Okay, we're here to replace the compressor. So first thing we need to do is take off our bottom panel. To do that, there are 9 1/4-inch screws that go around the perimeter. We're going to go ahead and take those out. Now we can grab our panel, pull it out and up. We have to disconnect this cord here in the center for power, and then we can somewhat access our sealed system and compressor here. If you wanted to get in there a little bit easier, you'd have to fully disconnect water valve and everything, so that's something that we're not going to be too concerned about right now. So what we need to work on is right in this area here. Alright, we'd already started to put our tap on here, ran out of oxygen, so I had to come back to finish doing that here. So we got just going to throw some flux on there, just for the heck of it. And then we're going to go ahead and light our torches, and go ahead and put this tap on here. There we go, that's better. Alright, back to where we were. So now we just have our tap installed. We're going to go ahead and put the wet towel on there to cool it down, and then we're going to check and make sure there's no leak on there. Alright, so I'm getting my damp rag to help just cool it down. Obviously we don't want to touch it. We're just going to lay it on there, and that's going to help bring the temperature down so I can work on it. Alright, now it's been on here for a minute or so, so it should be cooled down. I'm going to just remove my rag. I'm just going to tap it just to see how warm it is. Now I want to make sure there's no leak here, or else once I pierce it, all the refrigerant will leak out. So what I've done is I have my reclaimer hooked up to my gauges. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the other side of my gauges up onto the tap, and I'm just going to turn my reclaimer on. You could use your vacuum pump the same way, and we're just going to create a vacuum, and we're going to make sure that it holds. So is this still good? Okay, so I got my gauges here. I'm going to go ahead and open them. Then I'm going to turn my reclaimer on, so it's going to be noisy. You can see the dial went down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shut off the gauge. Close it up. Now I'm going to shut off my reclaimer. Basically, we're just watching the needle here. If there's a leak, we're going to lose pressure, lose our vacuum. It's going to go closer to 0. If there is no leak, it's going to stay here at 30. And I'll just leave it like this on a minute, maybe 2, and just monitor this and make sure that it's okay. Okay, and we look at our gauges basically in the same exact spot that we left it in, so we know that there's no leak for our vacuum to escape. So I'm going to disconnect my gauges from the compressor, the tap. I'm going to install the rest of the pieces for our tap, so that way we can remove the refrigerant next. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove my my hose here from my gauges. That is off. Next, what I'm going to do is we have our pieces, the remaining pieces to create our tap right here. We have our little white seal, which goes on the bottom of the little silver piece here. So that just slides on, just like that. We're going to go ahead and insert that into our little port, like there. And then when we screw this piece on, it actually forces it down inside there, and it will pierce our system for us. So I got that. I use my crescent wrench. I'll go ahead and crank it down. Now when I go here to really tighten it down, I want to support this so that way I don't just bend anything and damage it. Alright, so that's tight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back it off, take it off. I'm going to hook my gauges back up to it, which my gauges are still in the off position. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on there like that. My gauges are still hooked up to my reclaimer. I'm going to turn my reclaimer on, and I'm going to remove the refrigerant from the system. So, right here we can see the pressure that it's reading right now. I'm going to turn on the reclaimer. Open up my gauges. And it's going to actually pull it down to remove the refrigerant. Okay, while we're reclaiming, we're still going to turn the reclaimer back on. I'm going to go ahead and do some other work because we have to replace this compressor. I have to remove all the wiring, the overload relay capacitor and the ground wire here over here with the clip. I'll take that out, I'll just move it to the side. And then the mounting brackets. It's easier to do it now while the unit's cold. So they have little tabs here that I just have to twist, and then the bracket will come up, it'll pivot, and it'll come off the back bracket, the four corners. And then I can remove that. And then once I get all the refrigerant out, then we'll go ahead and unbraze our fittings. There are 3 joints. There's one here where our gauge connection is made, and then just slightly back here. So we'll unbraze those, get that out of the way. We can remove the compressor, get the new compressor installed, and do everything in reverse fashion. All right, so we're going to turn our reclaimer back on. Both of our brackets out. We can look at our gauges. We're now pulled into a vacuum. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut off the reclaimer, remove my gauges, and then we can proceed with removing the compressor. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the Schrader valve. So I got my Schrader valve tool here. Going to remove it. Set it aside with all my other supplies. Now that I have that seal out, I can go ahead and unbraze my 3 joints, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to get my torches ready. I'm going to go ahead and light them. Alright, so we have all of our connections are off the compressor. I'm going to use our wet rag, cool down all of the fittings, that way we don't hurt ourselves, and then that way we can then remove the compressor, and get the new compressor in position. Okay, so I have my, my wet cloth. I'm just going to make sure all of my spots I just brazed are cooled down. That way we don't injure ourselves when we try to grab the compressor to remove it. So we have them all cooled down here. Next step will be to actually remove the compressor. Now when you do that, you're going to want to be careful because the compressor still has oil in it. That way you don't dump it and you know, damage customer's home. And also when we pull it up, we want to make sure we don't catch any of the copper that's in place here. So make sure you have clearance before you just yank it and cost yourself a lot more work. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove our old compressor. Just to be safe, I'm just going to gently touch it to make sure it's not too hot. It is not. Got it out. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the old box, or the new compressor box. Now obviously we have our opening here where our compressor goes. While I have the access here, I'm going to go ahead and clean up our 3 fittings, and that way we can get them prepped and ready to go to be brazed into our new compressor. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up. I want to remove any impurities on here so that way we get a good bond when we braze in our fittings. That one looks pretty good. There's one down, 2 more to go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one next. This one will be the easiest one to do. It's freestanding. There you go, got that one cleaned up. Now we have one more in the, we'll say the cavity of the refrigerator here. So we're going to go ahead and clean up our last one. So we got them all 3 cleaned up. Alright, next step we're going to put the little rubber feet into the compressor here. And depending on your model, you may have to use the inner feet position for the feet. But on this one here, I've already examined and I can see where we're going to need them. I'm also going to remove our little seals in here. And typically they'll just pull straight out. So we got that out. Now we can go ahead and set our compressor in place. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just place our compressor in, making sure I don't catch any of the copper lines that are in there. I'm going to place it over the mounts, set it in position, and I'm going to go ahead and mount it in there because it's a lot easier to do when it's cold than when it's hot from being brazed. So I have our little mounting brackets that I'm going to go ahead and install the compressor in position. Take the first one, put it on, rotate it over, slip it over, and then I just have to take my pliers and twist it to lock it down, just like that. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. The other side's a little bit tighter. So we have that now mounted in place. Now I'm just going to do a dry fit of all of my connections and make sure everything is going to fit easily like it should for me. Alright, so I'm going to take my first one here. Alright, it seems with a little convincing it's going in for us, so that's alright. Leave that one out. Do the same over here. Our process stub came out. That one goes in a lot easier, so that's good. Remove that, and high side, that goes in just fine. So now I removed them all. I'm going to go ahead and flex all the fittings first, and then we'll reinsert them, and then we can go ahead and braze everything in. Alright, so I'm just going to add my flux. Alright, so now I can go ahead and insert my each line into the proper place of the compressor. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my first one, insert it into the compressor, just like that. And my second one, slide it into the compressor. Our last one may need a little bit more convincing. It's a little difficult to get in the first time. Nope. Look at it. magic of flux. There we go. Now we're all set up. Now we can go ahead and braze each connection. Alright, and I'm going to start in the back here. Just heat it up. Then let the heat do the work for us. One done. Alright, and then our final connection. Alright, we're going to shut down our torches. We're then going to use our inspection mirror and double check and make sure everything looks good. Alright, so I'm just going to check all my joints, make sure they're as good as I think they are. Alright, everything looks good. What we're then going to do now is we're going to cool down our fittings, make sure we can handle it with our rag. The main one we're worried about is the one where we have the access port, because we got to put our Schrader valve in there, and we want to make sure that that's nice and cool so it doesn't damage our Schrader valve when we get a leak. So we'll leave this in here for a minute or two. I'll start to clean up a little bit of the other work. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove my rag that I used to help cool this down. Touch it, it's cool to the touch. Take my Schrader valve, insert it back in place. I'm going to screw it down. Alright, so that's in there nice and tight. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put our reclaimer and our gauges, hooking everything back up to it. We're going to double check, make sure we don't have any leaks. And then also, it's also going to remove any moisture from the system by creating the vacuum. While we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and hook up the wiring. Now this is the old overload relay and capacitor that they gave you. They've supplied us with some new design, which is this here. It's going to go on the exact same way, plug in the exact same way, but they have new components for our compressor, so we want to make sure we put those in so the old ones don't damage our compressor. So we'll do that while we're reclaiming and making sure we don't have a leak. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hook my gauges up here. Go ahead and just open them up right now. Alright, so you can see we're at roughly at 0. Obviously once we hit that reclaimer, it should pull down into a vacuum. Here we go. Alright, so we're going to let this run for a few minutes and then we'll monitor our pressure. Alright, so we're going to disconnect our wiring. Pop that apart. This is now garbage. Take our new capacitor and relay. It'll slide together. Pop together. Take our harness. That's on there. And then we're going to line up our terminals onto the compressor. We're going to take our device. Slide it on. We have our ground wire. Slide it on. And then we have our mounting bracket that we're also going to reattach. We're going to take that. Okay, you can see our gauges where we're in the vacuum. I'm going to go ahead and shut my gauges off. So I got them closed up now. I'm going to shut the reclaimer off. And basically what we're going to do is monitor this for a little bit of time. Make sure that the needle doesn't move. If it does move, it means we have a leak somewhere. So we'll have to come back and repair that. But I know it's going to hold. Confidence is key. And then so we'll just monitor that. We'll come back and check it out in a few minutes. All right, here it is. It's been a little bit of time. We still notice that the needle is in almost the exact same location. We may get it to move a little bit because the pressure is going to be relative to temperature. Without the reclaimer on there creating the vacuum, the temperature may change slightly. Okay, now it's been roughly 5 minutes. Needle's still basically the same spot. So we know we have no leak. And now it's about time to put the refrigerant in. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add refrigerant to our unit. We're going to go ahead and turn my scale on. There we go. That's got a countdown mode that it's going to go through here. That's on. I'm going to go ahead and put my tank on there, my 134. I'm going to take the cap off here, put my gauges on. So we got that in. I'm going to go ahead and open up this. My gauges are still in the off position. I got my tank is open. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bleed the air that's in this line out. To do that, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this until I hear it hiss. So there, we know that the pressure from the refrigerant has pushed any air out. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to put my gauges into a spot where I don't have to move them because the hose is attached to my tank. So I'm going to try to find a good spot so that way the yellow line isn't moved. And that way I can still access my gauges. And once I see my scale has stopped moving, I'm going to go ahead and hit the 0 button to 0 out. Alright, I'm going to do it one more time just so it's zeroed out. And now we're going to have to add our refrigerant in. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my gauges. And I needed to say that we put 6 ounces in. Alright, in order to cheat, because my refrigerant wasn't going in very quickly, turn the compressor on. It's going to create suction. It's going to draw the refrigerant in for us. So we plugged it in and the refrigerant will go in a little bit faster. Like I said, we're looking for 6 ounces. We're currently at 1.5. And now we hit our 6. Shut it off. I'm going to give it a moment here just to make sure that my it doesn't adjust any to give up for weight. We just bounce back to 5.5. So I'm going to open it up, make sure it's actually at 6. All right, so we're charged up here. So we're going to go ahead and remove our tank, shut off our tank, remove our gauges from that, and then remove our gauges from the compressor. All right, I'm going to close up my tank. I'm going to go ahead and remove my gauges from there. You're going to hear a little as the refrigerant escapes. We got that there. I'll put the cap back on my tank. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remove our connection from our compressor. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just remove it. We're going to do the same thing. You're going to hear a little, just like that, as you remove this, just like you would on a bike tire. And we're going to go ahead and put the cap back on our compressor here. Just going to go ahead and just going to tighten it down. I don't need to over tighten it, just want to make sure it's on there. That's just going to be an extra defense in case that Schrader valve leaks. Just like that. Then our last step is to put our back panel back on and put our refrigerator back in position. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put our unit panel back on. Just going to tuck here at the bottom. Then we're going to fasten it back up with the screws that we took out earlier. There were 9 of them. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start reattaching the back panel here. Forget our strain reliefs that were on our lines here. Oops. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our refrigerator into the space that it was when we found it. Thank you for watching another quality in-home diagnostic video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com.